This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. A flurry of deal-making focused on trade and security ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Japan. All this as U.S. tariffs on most Indian goods double to 50%. Now, threats of levies weigh on attendees of the Boao Forum for Asia roundtable in Kuala Lumpur. Host Malaysia has made defending multilateralism top of the agenda. And South Korea's biggest shipbuilder maneuvers for a bigger slice of the American market after President Lee pledged billions to help revive the industry in the U.S. And China counts the costs of climate havoc. Torrential rains since July causing $2.4 billion in road damage across 20 provinces. Also in East Asia tonight, from coffee brewing robot barristers to dancing humanoids, China is pushing to integrate robots into daily life. But will consumers and investors get on board? A flurry of deal-making between Japan and India ahead of a summit between leaders Shigeru Ishiba and Narendra Modi. A Japanese media citing government sources say that both sides will pledge to step up collaboration, especially on security and trade. Now, fresh reports reveal details of a new talent exchange that could see Japan welcoming 50,000 skilled Indian workers a year to help drive growth and revitalize its economy. Now, Japan and India also widely expected to announce new initiatives at Friday's summit, ranging from semiconductors and artificial intelligence to critical minerals. Now, Mr. Modi's upcoming trip to Japan comes as additional U.S. tariffs on Indian goods take effect, rising to 50% from 25%. The Trump administration says the levies are retaliation for India's Russian oil purchases and over New Delhi's reluctance to open its farming sector. Ishan Gak, he joins us live now from New Delhi. Ishan, first up, why Japan? And secondly, what can we expect from Mr. Modi's summit with Mr. Ishiba happening this Friday?
Well, Japan, why? Because India has been trying to shore up its relationship with other partners since its ties with one of its most dependable trade partners, the United States, has come under strain. And Japan is one of India's oldest, more reliable allies, at least in Asia. So now we are seeing Prime Minister Modi visiting Japan with eye on two key items. A, of course, strengthening bilateral relations, and of course, also strengthening regional alliances. In terms of bilateral relations, we are going to see a lot of deal-making. Several items are on the agenda, including potentially expanding India and Japan's defense cooperation, Japan potentially announcing that it's going to send its bullet trains to India that will be used in a very highly anticipated bullet train project here, and also Japan potentially increasing its overall investment in India over the next decade to about $68 billion. And of course, as you pointed out earlier, this people-to-people contact as well, under which India is likely to send 50,000 skilled workers to Japan. So that's all happening on the bilateral front. But analysts here are also saying that Prime Minister Modi's visit to Japan is also considering the fact that as America's commitment to the Quad alliance that includes India, Japan, Australia and the US, US's commitment to that alliance is looking a bit shaky, and Prime Minister Modi's visit to Japan could breathe a sort of new life into that alliance. And this alliance has been crucial because the four countries have been discussing ways to improve connectivity between countries, to improve financing of climate projects, and also making supply chains more resilient. So it's going to be a very engaging and heavy diplomatic engagement between the prime ministers of the two countries.
Well, as we see here, the pivot, right, from India to Japan. In the meantime, though, how is New Delhi dealing with, the U.S. tariffs that are essentially now in effect?
Well, Indian government is reportedly preparing financial assistance packages for businesses that will be impacted by the 50% US tariffs. Now, we have to keep in mind that roughly 66% of America's exports to the US will now face 50% tariffs. Three big sectors have been exempt: pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, as well as electronics products. But a lot of the other sectors, especially the ones that are very labor intensive, like textiles, like leather, gems and jewelry, all of those are facing significant tariffs. And the Indian government is now reportedly working to provide some credit guarantees to these companies, or even potentially extending their loan repayment cycles. And all of this is likely to help. But experts are also pointing out that the impact on the Indian economy, at least in the short term, will certainly be felt with the damage ranging to tens of billions of dollars. At the same time, therefore, India has been looking to diversify its range of trading partners, signing a free trade agreement with the UK in the past few months, and now negotiating another one with the European Union. And that, experts say, is the way to go. By diversifying its pool of trade partners, India might be able to cushion some of the blow from US tariffs.
All right, many thanks for that report, Ishan Garg, speaking to us from New Delhi. In the meantime, some 200 delegates are gathered in Kuala Lumpur for the Boao Forum's roundtable for APEC cooperation. Host Malaysia has put defending multilateralism at the top of the agenda amid global uncertainty triggered by trade tensions. Now, CNA's Melissa Goh, she joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Mel, first up, what were some of the highlights from today's meetings?
Well, the two-day roundtable on regional cooperation of the Boao Forum saw participants, including world leaders, defending multilateralism and an open global trading system against rising protectionism that's sowing uncertainty and eroding confidence and affecting growth worldwide. Now, Malaysia Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, in his keynote address, said that the World Trade Organization, or WTO, is near paralysis. The global trading system is in distress. The so-called custodian is now the disruptor, of course, without naming who, anyone, or any particular country. Now, indeed, increasingly, trade tools are being weaponized to exert pressures on countries to wield geopolitical influence. Now, Mr. Anwar said countries around the world must stand together to reject all these unilateral efforts and measures such as export bans and decoupling that are being forced upon them. Let's hear him out.
We must renew that spirit, one with a firm conviction for a new kind of integration. It is the conviction that we can engage the world freely, but on our own terms. It is about striving for sovereign independence or interdependence, forging partnerships for our choosing, of our own choosing, not ties that are imposed from on high.
No, but that may be easier said than done, with US still the largest market, the largest consumer market, and the biggest investors in many of these countries in Southeast Asia, including in Malaysia. That's ASEAN chair this year. Now, nevertheless, many summits to deepen inter-regional ties were held this year, such as the ASEAN-China, ASEAN-GCC summit. Now, the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who's a guest of honor at the forum, is encouraged, he said, by the renewed optimism he sees in this part of the world, he said, in building bridges through regional economic platforms and trade pacts. Let's hear him out as well.
While globalization and free trade are confronted with the setbacks elsewhere, here in Asia and on the platform of the Boao Forum, people are still firmly committed to reviving APEC, upgrading RCEP, and expanding CPTPP.
So, Mel, we're seeing these countries one by one negotiating with the Trump administration. What were some of the biggest concerns that they've highlighted at this forum?
And plaguing the minds of participants here and world leaders as well is this lingering U.S. tariff threats, not knowing what's going to happen next. Now, ASEAN slapped with tariffs between 10 and 40%. Now, President Trump has warned of higher sectoral tariffs and transshipment offenses to help China that circumvent the export bans on AI chips and so on. So, former U.S. Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez, who was here as well, now he served under the Bush administration. Now, he said that he has this advice for countries in the region. Let's have a listen.
President Trump is consequential. There's no question. He has set the path for the future. It's going to be very hard to go back. It's relationships. To establish a relationship with the president, head of state to head of state. That's what works. Not a commission or not sending staff.
But what sort of relationship is that? I mean, it's something that countries here are not still grappling with at this moment. Now, what's for sure that this is no passing storm, Prime Minister Anwar reiterated at the forum. Now, meanwhile, Secretary General of the Boao Forum for Asia, Zhang Jun, he urged all sides not to lose sight of the big picture here. Now, Zhang Jun, who's also the former Chinese ambassador to United Nations, he stressed that no region, no country can survive on its own. Let's hear him out.
Whatever you choose the right side, you choose the right direction. Whatever happens, you have to be open, you have to be inclusive, and you have to be engaged with the rest of the world. Isolation, as I see it, never represents the right direction.
It's a challenging time ahead, and no one wants to choose sides here. Malaysia, as ASEAN chair, is planning to host more summits this year, apart from ASEAN-US Summit, East Asia Summit. There's also an RCEP Summit. That's the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Summit that's planned for October.
And I'm sure you'll be keeping a close eye on all of that. Thanks so much, Melissa Goh, reporting to us live from Kuala Lumpur. In other stories, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has ended his trip to the U.S. by visiting a shipyard owned by South Korea's Hanwha Group in Philadelphia. Well, the visit, underscoring investment plans, struck a day earlier during his summit with President Donald Trump. The South Korean leader promising to make American shipbuilding great again and revitalize the country's industry with $150 billion earmarked for the sector, following talks in Washington.
제가 트럼프 대통령께 제안한 미국의 조선업을 다시 위대하게 만드는 프로젝트는 단지 거대한 군함과 최첨단 선박을 건조하겠다는 비전만이 아닙니다. 사라진 꿈을 회복하겠다는 거대한 비전입니다.
Mr. Yi attended the christening of the state of Maine, an 8,400-ton national security vessel built for the U.S. Department of Transportation's Maritime Administration. Shipbuilding emerged as a key area of investment between Washington and Seoul as part of a South Korean promise to inject $350 billion into American projects. President Trump is keen to revive the sector to keep up with China, the world's largest shipbuilder and operator of the largest maritime fighting force. South Korea's HD Hyundai Heavy Industries, the world's biggest shipbuilder, is looking to lead U.S.-Korea shipbuilding cooperation projects. And to do so, it is merging with its affiliate, HD Hyundai Mipo. The move to merge is also driven by an anticipation that demand for K-defense will surge following the Korea-U.S. summit and as countries around the world strengthen their naval power. The merged company will be launched in December. Now, shipbuilding stocks rallying on hopes around collaboration with the U.S. HD Hyundai Heavy Industries surged more than 11%, and HD Hyundai Mipo jumped 14.6% to close at record highs. Taiwan has appointed former TSMC board member Kung Ming-sin as its new economy minister. Now, Mr. Kung will move from his current post as Cabinet Secretary General. He once represented the government's National Development Fund on the board of the world's biggest contract shipmaker, TSMC. The Economy Ministry plays a key role in overseeing Taiwan's vital semiconductor sector. The previous minister stepped down due to health concerns. Looks like China's flood season is putting a strain on its economy. The Transport Ministry says the massive deluge triggered by intense downpours has caused more than $2.2 billion in road damage since July. Well, the early estimate includes 23 affected provinces, regions, and municipalities across the country, making up more than two-thirds of China's administrative divisions. Now, China's disaster agency says the government has allocated around $810 million in fresh funding for disaster relief since April. It adds that natural disasters such as flooding, landslides, earthquakes, and drought have contributed to direct economic losses of up to $7.2 billion last month alone. Costs from climate-related damages are expected to pile further pressure on China's indebted local governments that may already be fiscally stretched to support job creation and public services amid a slowing economy. Meantime, Tokyo logged 10 consecutive days of temperatures soaring 35 degrees Celsius and higher just after the country sweltered through its hottest June and July. Well, Japan's meteorological agency says this is the first time such a run was recorded since the survey started in the 1800s. Japan has experienced a series of heat-related climate issues. It's already seen the hottest June and July and experienced the highest temperatures on record in August. In that incident, the mercury hit 41.8 degrees Celsius in the central city of Isesaki. Last week, the Fire and Disaster Management Agency said that more than 8,400 people in Japan were hospitalized. A dozen of them died later. Well, officials are urging citizens to seek shelter in air-conditioned rooms to avoid heat stroke. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China's industrial profits fall for a third straight, despite policy measures to help shore up the economic recovery. And an unexpected outcome from the first summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and his counterpart, Lee Jae-myung. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia Tonight. Well, Roland Lim joins us now for the very latest business news. So, Roland, let's talk about China's industrial downturn. That appears to be easing because Beijing is reining in the price wars. But how much relief are we actually seeing?
Well, cautious at best. That's what analysts tell me. Manufacturing is stabilizing, but weak demand and lingering deflation means the recovery is fragile. Profits at China's industrial firms continue to fall in July despite policy measures to help boost the economy. Industrial profits declined 1.5% on year as deflationary pressures persisted in the world's second biggest economy. Now, that's a third consecutive contraction, but a slower decline than in previous months as the government introduced measures to support domestic consumption and to curb price wars. Let's check in on the Greater China markets following that pulse check on the Chinese economy. Equities had rallied in recent sessions as policy support measures bring borrowing costs to record lows, boosting liquidity. William Ma, Chief Investment Officer from Grow Investment Group, tells us why he thinks the Chinese market is overbought and why investors still think it has some run to go yet.
Some number into perspective, the number of turnover has been increased by 15% year to date, year-on-year basis, and account opening 30%. And the market turnover increased to $3 trillion US. Last seen was really long time ago. And I think we are seeing big inflow from the retail to the mutual fund. If you look at the mutual fund market, it's increased by 135%. And also the ETF, we are seeing about 5 trillion renminbi of ETF size. So that's indicate the passive money and then the retail money are getting back to the market. There are three reasons, if you like, that I think drive the recent rally. The most important one from a fund manager perspective is the positive development so far of the US-China tariff negotiation, expected hopefully to finish in Q3 and Q4. And second is the low rate environment. Year to date, we are seeing about 5 trillion of renminbi bank deposit increase. At the same time, 90 trillion of renminbi bank deposit will expire. So all those low rate environment will push the retail investor back to the equity market. The third is last week we are seeing the first time in the last year or so global institutional investor and global ETF are coming back to the Asia market. So that provide a positive catalyst to the retail as well, because we are seeing global investors coming back because of potential US dollar depreciation and China-Asia rebound. I think there is an overbought situation in the near term, but back to the fundamental, the market is trading at 18 times price to earnings ratio. And if you look back the three bull market, so-called, if you like, in recent history of the China-Asia market, the rally between 90% to 270%. And this time around, the rally was like 35%. So I believe no matter domestically or globally, investors are still thinking about there are more legs to go on the Asia market.
Chinese food delivery company Meituan's profit almost got wiped out in the second quarter, undermined by hefty subsidies. It pumped into a discount battle with rivals Alibaba and newcomer JD.com. Net income plummeted 97% to $51 million for the June quarter, despite a 12% rise in revenue. Players in the highly competitive food delivery sector have resorted to aggressive subsidization of orders to woo customers in recent months. Despite the regulators' warnings on excessive competition, the bruising price war has continued, and it is eroding profitability across the sector. Rival JD's new businesses, including food delivery, also incurred an operating loss of more than $2 billion in the second quarter. Alibaba, too, has posted muted growth and is set to report earnings later this week. Meituan shares have declined more than 20% year-to-date amid the intense competition in the food delivery sector. The Chinese bubble tea chain Meituan reported strong first-half earnings, with its budget-friendly drinks proving popular among cost-conscious young consumers. Revenue rose 39% to $2.1 billion, while net income climbed 43% to $376 million in the first half of this year. Meituan, the world's largest food and beverage chain by store count, operated more than 53,000 outlets across China and 12 other countries as at the end of June, and that's up 23% from a year earlier. Most of its revenue comes from supplying goods and equipment to franchisees. Mitsubishi Motors has slashed its operating profit forecast for the current fiscal year, citing the impact of U.S. import tariffs, weaker sales expectations, and rising selling costs. Mitsubishi is expecting to post an operating profit of around $475 million for the fiscal year through to next March, and that's 30% lower than its previous estimate. The revised outlook reflects challenges in implementing planned price hikes and incentive cuts to offset tariff costs. The competition in the markets other than the U.S. have also intensified as companies seek to offset the U.S. tariff impact, pushing up selling expenses and putting pressure as well on profitability. Rival automakers have offered discounts in markets such as Vietnam and Australia to offset U.S. losses, while impact has also been seen in Indonesia and Germany. A compliment from U.S. President Donald Trump and some speculation has sent shares of South Korean pen maker Monami soaring to a 19-month high. Now, the stock jumped as much as 24% today, extending its two-day rally to more than 60%. It is the best performer on the benchmark Kospi index this week. President Trump was drawn to a wooden fountain pen in possession of his South Korean counterpart during their first person-to-person meeting at the White House. For nearly 2 minutes, Mr. Trump reportedly asked questions about the pen's origin and also held it before the two leaders moved to a closed-door session. Now, the exchange sent shares of Monami, a household South Korean name, soaring on assumptions it had made the pen. Another domestic brand, Janile, later denied or confirmed having made that coveted pen, adding that it was a custom-made job and not available for sale. Even then, Janile has since made clear its plans of not producing the pen, and it has received overwhelming orders. And that's it for business.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China going all in on AI and robots, pushing for their integration in industries and everyday life. Our correspondents will be joining us to tell us the impact and implications of this focus on tech. Hello, this is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we've been following. A flurry of deal-making focused on trade and security ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Japan. All this as U.S. tariffs on most Indian goods double to 50%. The threat of U.S. levies weighing on attendees at the Boao Forum for Asia's roundtable in Kuala Lumpur. Defending multilateralism, the focus of host Malaysia. And South Korea's largest shipbuilder, HD Hyundai Heavy Industries, merges with affiliate Mipo, hoping to capture a bigger slice of the U.S. market, after President Yi pledged billions to American leader Trump to help make U.S. shipbuilding great again. U.S. President Donald Trump has defended his move to allow 600,000 Chinese college students into American universities as part of trade talks with Beijing.
I like that other country students come here. And you know what would happen if they didn't? Our college system would go to hell very quickly. You'd have, and it wouldn't be the top colleges. It would be colleges that struggle on the bottom.
The U.S. leader's latest decision has sparked backlash. That figure is more than double the number currently enrolled in the 2023 to 24 school year. It also marks a shift in the Trump administration, which had initially sought to boost vetting for student visas and revoke it for those linked to the Chinese Communist Party. Well, Beijing has welcomed Mr. Trump's comments and hopes that Washington will act on his commitment to welcome students from China. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also urged the U.S. to stop what it calls unprovoked harassment, interrogation and deportation of Chinese students. Both sides are looking to move beyond their current tariff truce. China sending its international trade representative Li Changgang to Washington for informal talks this week. Reports say he will speak to deputy-level U.S. officials and that there is no planned meeting with his counterpart, Jameson Greer. The truce, while in place, appears shaky. Mr. Trump on Monday threatened 200% levies if China doesn't supply magnets to the U.S. Beijing had added several rare earth items and magnets to its export restriction list in retaliation to tariff hikes by the U.S. And China dominates rare earth magnet production, controlling about 90% of global supply. Now, in a race to accelerate AI and robotics growth, China launched what it's claiming to be the world's first 6S robot store in the tech hub of Shenzhen, where people can buy, service, customize, and lease robots. But just how sustainable is this growth model, and will investors bite? CNA's Deborah Wong has more.
Fancy a cuppa brewed by a robot barista? How about dancing with a humanoid robot? This is not a trade show, but a newly opened store in China's tech hub Shenzhen, which is breaking barriers for the man in the street.
So here at the store, customers can get close to robots, they can test out how they work. And I'm trying to get this robot to walk towards me. Let's see if it works. And let's see, turn. Okay, I guess it's not that difficult after all. Just a little bit of trial and error.
Shoppers can rent a robot for about US $700 a day, instead of committing thousands to a purchase.
就是因为现在的机器人就是相对这个价格还是稍贵一些。那好，我们推出了以租代购，就是通过以租赁的方式，我们来推动机器人快速进入一个机器人消费级时代。只有机器人变成一个消费级的产品，它才能够快速的走进我们的千家万户。这样的话呢，就是才能够推动整个产业的有一个快速的迭代发展。
A Moody's ratings report showed that China installed more than half of the world's robots since 2021, spurred by its desire to support a shrinking population and retain manufacturing competitiveness, but mostly to position itself as a front-runner in a global tech race. To lead in robotics, the country is repeating a familiar playbook, scale it through its vast consumer market.
我们过来看看它的这个机器人的应用，它有些什么应用？它是比较 工业型的应用啊，还是一些家庭性的应用啊，小孩子能不能有些玩具啊之类的这种，因为你不看我也不知道有些什么东西嘛。
有个机器人就相当于其实有个伴一样的，有时候要忙的时候，在家里要忙的时候啊，他可以自己去玩一下呀，他也会很开心，我就轻松很多啊，不用我来陪着他玩嘛。
先去介入，先去了解，可能会更助于我们在我们下一代的教育上面，包括对于老年人将来的他的一个生活的辅助方面，我觉得都会有很大的帮助。
Within a week of opening, the operator says it's raked in about $1 million from local and overseas clients, many of whom are business buyers.
我的6S 店有个很重要的是定制化，那就是要根据市场的需求，然后机器人它的技术的更新迭代，是要市场跟机器人要相互的，一个是市场的一个需求，或者相互的去促进这个行业的发展。
The site of Mr. Lin's store is sponsored by the local government. The Longgang district will also invest $1.4 billion over the next 3 years to deploy more than 1,000 humanoid robots in the public sector.
就是我们就希望能够通过不断的探索尝试，让它从不成熟走向成熟，让它从高成本走向比较低的成本，让它就是从完成很低级的很笨拙的一些劳动，到很娴熟的完成一些比较高难度操作的。
But can China's state-led approach in robotics replicate the success it achieved in other sectors, such as electric vehicles?
It provides great financial support to the industry, and it allows the industry to actually scale the applications from the factory floors towards a humanoid system. The governments of both Beijing and Shenzhen set up their own private funds at about 10 billion yuan to nurture AI and robotics. As of the end of 2023, UB Tech Robotics climbed about 1% on the first day of trading in Hong Kong. At that particular point of time, the Hong Kong market wasn't doing exceptionally well, unlike today. The policy drives the private sector and the public sector attention from there, and it also drives private markets.
Regardless, China's robotics ambition is expected to keep clanking forward as it seeks to shape the global race for another next-generation technology.
Now, to share more, we've got Deborah Wong joining us live from Shenzhen. Deborah, fascinating robots we just saw there. And of course, China wants to retain its manufacturing supremacy. But how exactly are companies using AI and robotics to do that?
So we have to note that China is increasingly facing competition in the manufacturing realm from the US, from Southeast Asia. So what they're doing, their game plan here is to use faster robots that are also smarter and cheaper because they're backed by state subsidies. And, robots are already in action all throughout China. We're seeing in the example of UBTech robots, UBTech is a robot maker here in the heart of Shenzhen. And they have deployed humanoid robots to build iPhones in the Foxconn factory. They're also helping local car maker NIO inspect electric vehicles. Now, my team here in Shenzhen, we visited Topstar in Dongguan City. And Dongguan City is a manufacturing hub of Guangdong. So what Topstar does is to provide molding machines for factories. And, the money here tells a story because they're raking in profits of about 400 million USD, and part of that is 83 million USD coming from just overseas sales alone. So we can see that the demand is there because factory owners, which are their clients, they want to address a labor shortage, they want to address rising labor costs as well as a shrinking workforce, and what they get in return is faster and higher output, fewer errors, as well as a consistent quality throughout. And it's also because China wants to reign manufacturing supreme. It wants more factories that never stop working.
All right, Deborah, also in your story, we saw young families there taking interest in the robotics store, for instance, that these robots could play the role as a nanny, for instance. So in order for China to scale up adoption in the consumer market, safety would be a concern, be a top concern, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you're right. Safety is a concern. Consumers themselves, they're generally fine with it because they're buying things like robo-dogs, they're buying things like the UBTech Alpha Mini dancing robot. The 6S store that you saw in the story, they even run workshops or training programs to get users very comfortable with using these robots at home. But industrial robots, now that's a whole different story because that's where compliance is important, safety standards are important. There have been failures that we've seen all throughout social media We've seen autonomous vehicles stopping in the middle of the road, causing traffic jam. And I think most recently, we also saw this Baidu robotaxi in Chongqing crashing into a construction pit. And the passenger in there had to claw her way out. So incidents like these, they do spark debates and safety concerns and even slow down the adoption rate because it leads to trust, right? And, analysts that I spoke to say that these are concerning, but they also say that risk is a part of any new industry. What matters is how they own up to it, how they respond, and how they can turn these failures into public trust. Have a listen.
I think there was a lot of concern where there was a recent factory, the Unitree robot malfunction, right? 2 people was almost hurt very badly as well. I think the company was very transparent about it. So they shared that robot stabilization system misinterpreted physical constraints. It's not great that accidents like that happen, but it's also good that the company and the industry as a whole are very open and very upfront about all this. Consumers, certainly stock market investors, do look at how companies react to those kind of problems.
So, Deborah, it appears like Shenzhen is shaping up to be a front runner in the AI and robotics race. Is that a fair assessment?
I think Shenzhen is trying to be, but there are also other players from other provinces coming up. I'm joined now by my colleague from the digital desk, Melody Chan, who's our correspondent here in Shenzhen for digital. Melody, thank you for joining us. Now, you did a story with our Shanghai team where you deep dived into provincial competition. Can you tell us what Shenzhen brings to the table and what sets it apart?
Right. So I think what sets Shenzhen apart from the other cities is how fast it's able to turn, these concepts into everyday life. Here in Shenzhen, we have flying drones delivering bubble tea. We have courier robots zipping through the metro stations. The ability for Shenzhen to put this idea into commercial use is because it has a very dense supply chain, and they're able to deliver parts to the company within hours. But Shenzhen is not alone. You see, Beijing is actually dominating in the research field. So they have thousands of AI firms, top universities, whereby analysts actually term it as, having an unmatched edge in terms of the future development of AI. And for Shanghai, because it's an international financial hub, it has a lot of global connection. And so they're able to bring a lot of capital into the city and able to host those kind of global conference there. And Hangzhou, for example, is also up and coming because of the Six Little Dragon, which are a lot of those very dynamic startups. Beyond Alibaba, you have DeepSeek, Deep Robotic, and Game Science, which was very popular for their game, the Black Myth Wukong. So it's not about just one city being on the top. It's about all of this hub, trying to play to its strength. So we've done a story with our colleague Bong Xingying in Shanghai. Maybe we can have a look at the overall view.
Getting a robot to find you the nearest MRT exit. This is not sci-fi. It's just another day in Shenzhen. From AI customer service to flying drones to autonomous taxi, this is one of the boldest real-world test beds for AI anywhere in China. Today, I'm trying out Pony AI's autonomous taxis here in Shenzhen. You just book, hop on, and go. So far, it's fast, it's smooth, and it allows you to hop on from hundreds of pickup points within Shenzhen's Bao'an and Nanshan district, covering an area of roughly 200 square kilometers.
Shenzhen may be China's living lab for autonomous tech, but Shanghai is taking its claim on the world stage. I'm here in front of the Shanghai Foundation Model Innovation Center, where the city's cutting-edge AI models are developed, showing exactly why Shanghai is earmarked for the World AI Cooperation Organization's headquarters. With that, the city now carries Beijing's mandate to lead on AI diplomacy. As Shanghai builds its international profile, Beijing holds fast as China's research powerhouse. Its elite universities and national labs keep it at the core of the nation's AI progress. Then, there's Hangzhou and Chengdu, both stepping up in different ways. Hangzhou, led by giants like Alibaba, excels in large language models, smart cities, and e-commerce AI. Chengdu, Western China's innovation hub, draws on state-backed labs and policy support to grow in robotics, healthcare, and public service AI.
So who's winning China's AI race? Analysts we spoke to said it's not a sprint, it's a relay. Beijing's the brain, Shenzhen's the hand, and Shanghai's the voice. Hangzhou and Chengdu rising fast. No single winner, just cities running their leg in China's AI marathon.
From diplomacy to deployment, China's AI race is no longer just about one capital, but how each city defines the future in its own way. So the question might not be who wins, but who leads where it matters.
Right, so like what we have heard, it's not about just one city, but this competition is also bringing up a question about evolution, you see. It's not just the bigger names. Analysts told us even the more remote areas like Inner Mongolia, Chengdu, Guizhou, they are also trying to come up with very ambitious AI plans. And to a point whereby even the Chinese President Xi Jinping has mentioned this, he calls it the herd mentality, whereby every project these provinces are bringing up with has got something to do with either AI or new energy. And analysts we've spoken to actually warn about this, piling in too fast without a very clear strategy, heavy investment. It might mean a lot of wastage rather than actual breakthrough.
But do you think this excessive competition can actually propel China forward, for its ambitions to become a world leader in AI robotics?
Right. So despite the risk, of course, this city, they are not just competing to be on top. They are trying to help the companies to push abroad. So, for example, Pony AI is a robot taxi company. They are trying to increase their fleet size from 300 to 1,000 within China. And they're also collaborating with companies overseas like ComfortDelGro in Singapore and trying to bring this pilot that's currently in Guangzhou, hopefully to Singapore by end of this year. So the bigger picture, as what analysts told us, is that Beijing doesn't just want one AI capital for China. They're hoping to become a global player, trying to set the rules of the game to export their products. So if I may, I want to end this, conclude this with a quote that we've heard from one of the Shenzhen AI officials, which is he wants Shenzhen not only to belong to China, but to belong to the world.
Thank you, Melody. And of course, for one way Shenzhen to do that is really to showcase the kind of tech prowess that it has. The city just marked 45 years since the setup of the special economic zone, and there was a light and drone show happening all throughout the civic district, and we saw thousands of people pouring into the streets, and they've also populated the mountain nearby just to take videos of the drone show. I think it's really truly a stage to flaunt its technological advancement, and we have certainly a lot of ground to cover here in the Shenzhen Bureau.
A very impressive display there. I really enjoyed the discussion between you guys. Thanks so very much, CNA's Deborah Wong and Melody Chan in Shenzhen. All right, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, Pyongyang warns the US and South Korea that they will pay a dear price as it again denounces ongoing military drills between the two allies. North Korean state media has called South Korean President Lee Jae-myung a hypocrite after the leader called for denuclearization at this week's talks with Japan and the US. Pyongyang's KCNA said that Lee had pretended he wanted to restore relations and called him a, quote, confrontation maniac. The agency also said that Lee's mention of denuclearization was, quote, a naive dream. The South Korean leader had asked U.S. President Donald Trump to help make peace between the North and South when the two met at the White House on Monday. His U.S. visit came right after a summit with the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, where the two sides called for the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Mr. Lee has been seeking warmer ties with the North since he took office in June, but Pyongyang has repeatedly rebuffed his peace offerings. Well, North Korea also denounced the South's drills with the U.S. as it accused Washington of attempting to, quote, occupy the Korean peninsula. A senior official from Korean People's Army warned that Seoul and Washington will face an unpleasant situation and pay a price if they continue their military exercises. The South Korean and American militaries, as part of their 11-day annual Freedom Shield combined drills, performed a so-called wet gap crossing in Yeoju to boost their ability to cross water obstacles. Some 300 U.S. and South Korean military personnel were part of the exercise.
Today's training highlights the U.S.-ROK relationship and the strengthening of this alliance.
Australia and the Philippines are holding live fire exercises north of Manila to boost combat readiness. The drills are part of the wider joint military exercise between Canberra and Manila. It's the largest ever. It began nearly 2 weeks ago and is scheduled to end on Friday. Thousands of military personnel from both countries are involved in the weeks-long exercise, which also encompass amphibious landings, air support operations, and special forces maneuvers. Buena Bernal joins us live now from a military base in Nueva Ecija in the Philippines. Buena, first up, let's walk us through the significance of this joint military exercise between Australia and the Philippines.
Australian Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense Richard Marles, as well as Philippines Secretary of Defense Gilberto Teodoro Jr., have underscored the importance of a rules-based order in the region, and they say that this growing cooperation is really about preventing or deterring any country from using terror and might to resolve conflicts or achieve territorial ends. And while there are multiple regional flashpoints, including overlapping claims between China and Japan in the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, and overlapping claims among Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, the Philippines, China, including Taiwan in the South China Sea, it's worthy to note that these two leaders underscored in their joint statement and zoomed in as their first concern Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a crisis that has seen Russia and North Korea gaining significant combat experience. And this is a regional security concern because there are analysts who say that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is providing a blueprint for China, or that it could embolden China. And while these two leaders did not make that link, they did express serious concerns on what they called dangerous and coercive actions by China against Philippine vessels in the South China Sea. They also urged regional players to prevent companies from providing military support or dual-use goods to Russia. Now, against that backdrop, these drills are really about combat readiness of both Australia and the Philippines.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to maintain pressure on the adversary, on the enemy. So every second or every minute that you don't have a artillery shell falling on the enemy, it's good news for them.
So what they're trying to do here is really ensuring that they are able and ready to engage in warfare against the common enemy should circumstances require it, even if officials are saying that these drills are not aimed at any one particular country.
So, Buena, the defense ministers of both nations, they've also pledged to upgrade ties last week. So what's in store for the allies?
The plan really is to sign an enhanced defense cooperation agreement by 2026. So until that agreement is signed, nothing is really set in stone. What we do know is that in that statement of intent that they signed, they say that they are committing to progress arrangements for Australia's use, construction, and maintenance of defense infrastructure in the Philippines. Now, we don't know exactly how these two countries will operationalize that. What we do know is the United States has a similar agreement with the Philippines that enables the United States access to currently 9 Philippine bases. But up until that agreement is signed, nothing is set in stone. But what that agreement would be coming from is the existing visiting forces agreement of these two countries that enables the ease in movement of military personnel and military hardware between Australia and the Philippines.
Well, thanks so very much for that report, Buena Bernal, speaking to us from Nueva Ecija in the Philippines. And on that note, it is time to wrap up Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Thanks for watching.